Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, one thing that we know for certain about Wuthering Waves version 2.4 is that it's a damn good version, and it's also brought a lot of new players to the game. And so one topic that I actually wanted to focus on when it comes to new players particularly is the idea of progress. And in a game like Wuthering Waves, progress is going to be determined by mainly one thing, right? Which is going to be your usage of something like a wave plate. However, it's also going to be determined by how well you're able to use them, and as a result, how well you're able to access endgame content like the Tower of Adversity or Whimpering Wastes. The big focus over here is going to be on the TOA today, because one thing you can see on the side is that, well, it resets on a monthly basis. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, if it resets on a monthly basis, is the fact that you can lose out on rewards. You can just see the preview over here. That's a lot of astrite. And with those blue Doritos that you're seeing in the corner, right, that you get from clearing, ooh, that's a lot of tuners. That's a lot of Echo EXP. That's a lot of shell credits. And if that's not stuff that you're claiming on a monthly basis, that's a lot of potential lost progression. And so what I wanted to do today was actually break down some of the fastest ways that you'll actually be able to clear this endgame mode with the lowest amount of investment. And that focus is, of course, going to be on the type of characters that you're trying to invest in. And so with that, let's go ahead, let's get right on into it. This game mode as a whole isn't the most difficult thing ever. I think it's widely considered one of the easiest endgame modes in Gacha. And so when it comes to getting there as fast as possible, this is what I would say. Focus on your teams. Focus on your teams and focus on who you're leveling up. Try to level up only 1 DPS for your first team and 1 DPS for your second team. You see this example that I'm showing up here on the stream? You see this Brant, Carlotta, Chang Li team? This is one of the worst possible teams you can invest in as a new player. This is a 0 out of 10 in terms of recommendation. And the reason why is pretty simple, ladies and gentlemen. Because, as you'll notice, right, all 3 of these characters
I alone will decide whether
have some pretty crazy builds.
Guide us next.
Some pretty crazy builds that required a lot of work, a lot of grinding, a lot of tuners, a lot of Echo experience to get going. And this is the thing. Characters in Wuthering Waves can have teams that are a lot more affordable. Here are some examples of teams that are way higher priority to actually make. For example, this is a typical one that I think is a joy for all newer players. This team over here. What you'll realize in this team is that only one of these characters actually needs to be built to clear endgame content. And the only character that needs to be built on this team is a Camellia, because she's going to be the main DPS of this lineup. And the other characters, for example, right, this is what my Verena looks like. She's level 80. She could be level 40 or 50. And this is what her Echo builds look like. I typically can just put on level 1 Echoes on my Verena, right? Just level 1 attack Echoes. Let's just look at some general builds, right? Level 1 attack Echoes. I don't even have this one tuned. I could replace this one entirely with like a level 0 Echo. And because of how strong Sonata sets are in this game, like this rejuvenating glow one over here, that's going to, in practice, just give 15% attack to my entire team as long as she's able to use a healing ability, which is super easy. I don't need anything else on her. I just need her there on the field to activate things like her outro skill, buff the team, have a little bit of healing on the side, and provide intro skills for my other teammates, as well as this Sonata buff. And that's it. That's all she needs to do. And as long as her ER is at an acceptable level, like 230, 220, 200, she doesn't need anything else. And it's the same exact thing for a sub DPS like Sanhua. You'll notice she has no equipment on right now. She's going to have a level 80 weapon, an Overture. She's doing no damage. And this is the build that I run on her. Check this out. Her stats are dog shit. She's missing a 3-cost Echo, sure. I'm gonna put in a random one. I'm gonna put a fusion damage bonus on her. And this is also what I'll do. I'll put in 1-cost Echoes over here. This will be glacial damage. Fuck it. Let's make sure it's actually useless. Let's put a spectro damage one on her. And for this last Moonlit Clouds on the Impermanence Heron, we're gonna make it a +0. This is what I call naked builds. What this means is that they're incredibly low investment. You're only using these characters for their concerto abilities and their Sonata set buffs, and they're doing absolutely nothing else on the team. She has 889 attack. my Varina does absolutely no damage. And this is the team comp will run. And what you'll find is that, well, teams like this can still be used in the overworld, and perhaps most importantly of all, they'll still clear endgame content. So let's give it a bit of a test, and you'll see firsthand just how strong naked builds can be. Guys, the reason why is that if I'm gonna make mistakes, if I'm gonna be making mistakes in the gameplay, I have to be using the SIG. Right? If I'm gonna be, like, fucking up and just, like, tanking random hits. And what you're gonna notice over here, right, as we go throughout the clear is that, well, skill issue becomes pay to win. Okay, we're missing every single crit. We're missing every single crit. That's a little unfortunate. Did we miss that one too? Okay. So, as you can see over here, right? The clear isn't the craziest one ever. And the reason for that is that this Tower of Adversity reset is a little bit not that great for Camellia at all. It might be one of the worst resets in TOA history for Camellia, if we're frankly being honest. But even with these characters on quite literally negative investment, on a reset that's awful for her, right? We're still able to clear. And we also missed a decent number of crits. Like that one over there. So that's just a purely naked build. None of the other teammates have any investment at all. They're doing literally 0 damage. And we are against a TOA floor where we have absolutely no benefit at all. The only thing we're doing is arrow damage equal to 120% of our max HP on a liberation cast. And none of the characters that I used scale off of HP. So it's almost like having no buff at all. And that's a 3-star clear. This clear only gets incrementally easier the more investment I put on the Sanhua. The investment on the Varina doesn't matter as much, but when I'm over here and I'm running Spectro damage bonus 3 cost, and a fusion damage bonus 3 cost, an HP 1 cost that's +0, an attack that is, you know, you can't expect the best performance ever. But that's what's possible when you do these lower investment builds for characters and focus entirely on vertically investing in one unit. And this will carry you through a good part of the TOA. And when you have limited resources, right, to do things like invest in your echoes, make sure that you have good substats, blah, 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 roll double crit on every piece, the more you're able to hyper invest in those first 2 DPS characters, the more you'll be able to quickly accomplish in the TOA. And then once you're able to start getting some of those limited rewards in the first place, then you can start spreading the roster a little bit wider and investing in more teams. These are going to be my highest priority picks, and I'll show you the actual lineups for the best teams, in my opinion, to start vertically investing in first. If the TOA and a little bit of Whimpering Waste is your goal. We looked at this one over here, right? This is going to be another team, and I know some people are gonna like, oh, they're gonna be like, oh, he's gay, or oh, ew, a dude. This is another very good team to vertically invest in right off of the bat, because guess what is similar about both of those teams? They involve only one 5-star unit, a limited one, and the other 2 teammates are either free from the beginner banner or they're a 4-cost unit. So that's that one. There's gonna be another team as well that's also really, really good to vertically invest in early, and that's actually gonna be this one, where you either use a Yang Yang as your 4-star, or you use a Tao Chi over here as your 4-star, right? It's one of these two. And then you have the opportunity of upgrading this one to a Jeja at a later point. But this is also a very, very strong team right off of the rip to get on into. Those are going to be my main 3 suggestions because I'm going to be honest here, ladies and gentlemen, they're kind of the best ones. Now it's time for me to get into some... Actually, there's one more decent team, or one more actually good team, and that's going to be with Phoebe as the main DPS, and then you got Rover over here on Spectro version as their support. And that's going to be the 4th low budget, high reward sort of team. Now, let me get into some DPS characters that you should avoid as a new player. Stay away from them because your results are going to be not that great for the investment that you're putting in. These are more for advanced characters, or for more advanced accounts. Avoid these ones. And the reasons are pretty simple. She requires another built DPS on her team to function. If you're running Chang Li and you try to run a naked build on another teammate, you're pretty much going to fall right on your face. You're pretty much going to fail miserably. Your clears just won't happen. Cartithia might be overly shilled in the most recent TOAs, and she looks like she can solo content because the TOA buffs are designed around her. I don't suggest actually thinking that this is going to be carried forward into the future. The other thing is that if you're a new player that hasn't gotten to Septimont yet, you can't even level her up. Yeah, she'll be stuck at like level 40 if you haven't gotten to Septimont yet. Jany's going to require a hyper amount of investment if you're not going to be running Phoebe with her. She's going to require a lot of investment as well as a very, very good rotation with Spectral Rover if you're going to be using her at like level 80. And these are teams, right? These are characters that basically heavily rely on a more expensive teammate to essentially reach the level of performance that's going to be good for a newer player. But if you're a newer player that does have one of their best in slot teammates, well, you still have the barrier of needing to invest in that other teammate as well. The only one that I'd say is a bit more easier to access is Jiny with the Phoebe, because Phoebe can be ran with that naked build, right? She can have almost nothing in terms of echo investment. As long as she has Moonlit Clouds, you're pretty much good to go for Phoebe. Cartithia, if you do have Chacona, I'm pretty sure Chacona is also going to be relatively okay on 0 investment with a really, really off Gusts of Well consent, as long as she has good investment. But these teams are way more expensive, right, than the ones that I just showed. Because the Camellias, the Gions, the Phoebes, for really, really good performance, all they need is a 4-star character, or in Phoebe's case, a free one. And so that's really it, right? I'm thinking about it from the free-to-play perspective mostly, right? Or the low-spender perspective. Not somebody that's going to get every single limited 5-star in the game. And these are kind of like the best low investment characters. Brandt's a special case because if he is well built on something like tie-breaking courage, and you have a character like Sanhua, who once again is free, you should be like good to go to use him as a hyper carry, and you shouldn't really have too many problems at all. But the caveat is that he probably has the most restrictive echo requirements in the game, where you want a combination of crit damage, crit rate, and ER on almost every single piece. Otherwise, his damage output is going to be really, really, really low. But if you do accomplish those goals, he ends up with really, really high damage that's incredible for an S0 unit. The last DPS that I'll talk about is going to be Jiny. Jiny is a little bit of a special case because I think that, unfortunately, her output has kind of not really stayed up to date unless you're willing to invest in one of her limited sub DPS characters. If you have a Jiny and you also have something like a Cantarella or a Jeja, then 100%, right? She's good to go. You don't really need builds on these two characters. You just put them on Moonlit Clouds and get them ready to support her, and she'll do just fine because they're mainly being used for their outro skill buffs, right? That are going to provide a massive amount of resonance skill damage over. But unfortunately, right, they're kind of expensive. Jiny does have a budget team where you use her with Yan Wu, but I'm gonna be real over here. This team kind of isn't really that good, especially if you don't have a spectro damage bonus for her to work with. It'll definitely work in like the side towers. You shouldn't have that much of a problem, but this is probably one of the most outdated teams in the game. And unfortunately, right, there has been a slight amount of HP inflation in Wuthering Waves, particularly due to the fact that the expectation is that you actually have, you know, a slightly built sub DPS in your lineup. And with Yan Wu providing no benefit from his outro skill, unlike other characters, damage output of the team kind of just hasn't really kept up. When every other sub DPS at low investment is able to provide an outro skill, even if they're not doing their own personal damage, yeah, Yan Wu has kind of just fallen out of the competition. It's a little bit of a tricky situation with her. newer, you can give it a try, but I don't know if I would necessarily suggest it too much. Zhang Liao, I don't actually recommend him for newer players anymore. Because I'm gonna be real, his damage output is kind of not that good. Like, you'll put a lot into his echo resources, you'll put a lot into, like, getting his weapon, and the only teams that he feels particularly great in nowadays is in a dual DPS lineup with a Chang Li. But that requires both of these characters to be built, and that's an expensive team. You can use him with Yinlin, and you can clear. The thing is that Zhang Liao has a much safer rotation. He has built-in crowd control. He CCs the enemy, and as a result, his damage output is kind of a lot lower than other DPS characters. And he's like fallen behind because his rotation time takes so fucking long. His rotation time taking a very long time is what allows a quick swap team with Chang Li actually to work out well. But like I said before, it's an expensive team to run. And if your goal is once again to clear the TOA on a budget, well, your best options, ladies and gentlemen, are right here. That's really just it. They'll get you to clearing the fastest and probably the cheapest. And you want to know the other thing? These two characters are the best Whimpering Waste characters in the game as well. And so that means if you're investing in them to clear the TOA, you'll also be able to clear the other endgame mode, Whimpering Waste, which has another similar set of Astrite rewards. Yeah, that's pretty good stuff over here. Hopefully this was helpful, ladies and gentlemen, especially for all those newer players. Let me know what you all think. Peace.